I used to think this car oversteered too much. Every time the rear started walking wider than I expected, I'd blame the setup or the angle or the grip. But watching this run back, it's not really oversteer that's catching me out. It's the way I react the second something feels slightly unpredictable. And that reaction is way smaller than I thought. This is the S14 at Usui, downhill first. It's equipped with an angle kit, so steering range isn't the issue. I've got room with medium power, decent grip, and nothing too extreme. It's actually a pretty stable setup. Early corners feel normal, rotation builds, I countersteer, and the throttle's balanced. Nothing too insane, but downhill has this way of loading the car faster than you expect. The rear doesn't snap, it just keeps walking a little longer than what my brain predicted. And that's where the sketchiness shows up. If you watch my steering, it actually looks pretty composed and I'm already in countersteer the whole time. So on the surface it feels like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, but the problem is more subtle than that. It's not the correction itself, it's what's happening underneath it. Right here, everything actually feels pretty good. My entries are clean, angle builds up the way I'm expecting, my throttle's steady, and my steering is calm. There's nothing dramatic happening. If anything, this is the kind of section where you start feeling confident because the car is responding exactly the way you predicted. And that's important because when a few corners in a row feel clean like this, you start assuming the next one will behave the same way. You get comfortable with the rhythm. Downhill has a way of just hypnotizing you into that rhythm, where the car feels predictable and you stop questioning what the weight transfer is about to do next. Then here's where it changes. The entry felt normal, I initiated and was already in countersteer and everything looked composed. There was no frantic correction, and that's what made it confusing, especially real time. The car just kept drifting outward a little longer than I expected. Not a big mistake, just a continued outward walk while it's still loaded downhill. And because I was already countersteering, there wasn't some obvious fix left to apply. If I soften throttle even slightly because the wall is there, the rear stops pushing the car down the road and starts floating outward instead. And that outward float is enough. It doesn't feel like panic, it feels like the car tugged toward the wall. But when you slow it down mentally, it's just weight transfer finishing the corner in a way I didn't fully anticipate. Now, the double hairpin shows a different version of the same thing. Going into the second one, I scrubbed more speed than necessary. It's not obvious, but it's not a full panic lift. It's just slightly more caution than the car actually asked for. You can see the speed fall off, and once momentum drops on a downhill hairpin, the angle doesn't carry the same way. So I had to reapply throttle to keep the slide alive, and that second weight shift made the transition feel messy. Nothing huge happened, but the rhythm broke. And once rhythm breaks on a touge, you're just reacting to the last correction instead of flowing through the corner. That's how panic stacks through tiny interruptions. Uphill feels completely different right away. You feel the car needing more commitment just to keep the angle alive. Downhill kind of carries the rotation for you because the gravity is helping it build, but uphill you actually have to drive it forward or it dies. Right here you can see that I'm feeding the throttle earlier just to keep the rear from straightening too much. The steering inputs are smaller, but they're more deliberate. If I over-rotate even slightly at the speed, the car won't slide dramatically wide like it did downhill, it'll just slow down and tighten up. And that's where the margin changes. Uphill isn't about surviving outward movement, it's about protecting momentum. Every degree of angle has to justify itself. You can feel that here. The car doesn't want unnecessary angle, it wants to drive up the road. And this is usually where ego creeps in without you noticing it, because you start thinking, I can carry more angle than that, and I can make this look better, when really the climb is asking for efficiency more than drama. So coming into this next section, I give it a slightly bigger flick than the corner really needs. Because I entered with more rotation than necessary, you can feel the car scrubbing speed the whole time. The car doesn't want to accelerate out the same way. Instead of driving forward cleanly, it kinda hung up at angle. And once the speed drops a touch, the inside line gets closer. If I had relaxed the angle earlier and let it straighten progressively, the car would have driven out with more momentum and more margin. But because I stayed committed to the initial angle, it boxed me in. It's not wild steering or panic in the obvious sense. It's just holding on to something longer than necessary because it felt right at the moment. Watching this back, what really stands out isn't some huge snap or dramatic moment where the car just disappears on me, because that never actually happens here. There are a few corners where the rear kept walking a little longer than I expected, and instead of just letting it finish and driving it forward, I slightly changed something. Maybe I eased the throttle a touch because the wall felt close. Maybe I hold the angle a fraction longer because it looks good. And those small shifts are enough to change how the weight settles. And that's really the pattern through the entire run. The car isn't oversteering in some uncontrollable way, it's just completing the corner in a way that feels uncomfortable for a moment. If I stay consistent through that uncomfortable phase, it usually resolves itself. When I react early because it feels like it might get worse, that's when the line widens or the speed drops. So the difference isn't some massive technique change, it's just whether I let the car finish what it's doing before I step in. Most of the time, it wasn't too much oversteer. It was me not waiting long enough. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.